inspirational relationship lesson between the pod powers of Nai and Ni. There are two ways of looking at it. What it is that inspires Ni about Nai and what inspires Nai about Ni. Today we're going to focus on I of Nai is what Nai finds inspiring about Ni. What is the relationship that gives that? And the best way to look at it is to kind of go over the power flows again. So you'll need to have gone over the basic power flows for Ni, understand that, and also the basic power flows for Nai, understand that, and then have continued on to buoyancy and to frustration, because those concepts need to be understood already before we get into this material. So that is assumed, we move forward. Or assume, we don't like that word. Let's go, that's a given. That's a given. Because I know that joke. I know that joke. Okay, so let's start with Nai. Nai has the concept of the unknown. The pervasive theme of frustration with Nai comes up right there with the fact that you have to take that time out that's a little annoying to have to take, because the other powers, like I said, they don't like a full timeout. Except there's a notable exception. That's kind of going to be the theme here, is the notable exception of Ni. Is so Nai has to take a timeout, which the other powers don't generally like, to go look for something. Doesn't, oh, Rocket, so something happened for yourself, if you know the game. But, where was I? Oh yes, the unknown. So you have to go do it. There's a compulsory quality to it because it's a directive left brain power. So the Nai user, or Nai, let's go with Nai for right now, Nai has to go do it. We'll say Nai user because that's everyone. Everyone technically is a Nai user, it's just a question of where in the psyche. So the Nai user, it pulls them away. So you kind of have to leave the party. Now, that's a bit frustrating. But what if there was another power that said, what you doing? Where you going? They're actually interested in the person or the thing that's leaving the party, leaving the system, leaving where everyone or everything is currently at. Because that's what you have to do. You have to leave. Most of the other pod powers, and therefore mojos and social alchemies, aren't looking forward to someone saying, I want to check out, which is the next part of the power flow, detachment. You have to leave. Well, that comes from the point of view of, I have to leave because it's not here. It's something else. I don't know what it is, right? I have to look for it. Ni takes the point of view of what you doing, and then you give the thing which you know is probably lame of there's something else. I don't know what it is, but there's something else. And Ni goes, I know. And they're like, they think that's obvious. That doesn't everyone know? And that's because they have sixth sense and imminent potentiality. They are tuned to that, what is about to be uncovered, about to be discovered, about to be changed, game changing. Sixth sense is geared to that. The beats are going bop, 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 but there's a chance that they could go somewhere else. Now, some people feel that more than others. So if you feel that more, you have Ni higher, then the fact that there is a game, I guess you'd call it a game of forms. A game of forms that is taking place over the game of solids. That is the realm that the interpretive perception powers play in, the realm of forms. So the Nai has to go, the Nai user go get spirit forms, or what do you even call them, conceptual forms if you're more comfortable with that. But you have to get these forms and then use them to figure out what is not known. The Nai person, it's a bit lonely because it is a subjective perception power. There's a loneliness that happens there. Ni is sort of like its partner in the psyche, so that Nai is never alone. All the pod powers have that. They have a partner, an inspirational partner, so that they're never alone. So that's kind of cool. And if you don't experience that or feel that, then that's a reason to look more into your mojo and social alchemy and things we can teach you here, because you should have that. And once that happens, the inspirational powers can basically just keep making more and more energy, more and more greatness. And that's why you actually have to have modulation powers, because those two powers, inspiration powers, could just keep going and making more stuff. In this case, what is that? Mysteries, cases to solve, that's fun. Except Nai has to check out all the time, has to detach all the time. But Ni thinks that's fun because the party, the system, the people, what was going on, it was getting boring. Ni gets bored very fast. So the idea that leaving the system, leaving where the people are currently at, could give something better than it is now, that appeals to that brand of gathering. That seems like a good likelihood of finding something really cool. Okay, next, envisioning, conceptualizing. Well, that's when I'm an empty cup, I'm a blank canvas, whatever you want to call it. I am just neutral, pure quasi-state, and I'm allowing the inner spirit forms to come, the inner conceptual forms to come. So that's what I need. And it's a self-generated process. And generally, it needs to be a self-generated process because who's got spirit forms, right? It's kind of a card game. You got spirit forms? Got spirit forms? Yeah, right. So, do you have some concepts for me? That's not a coin that most people are into or appreciate, not even sometimes those who have that high in their priority for their psyche. It's just because it's so intangible. But it is a thing. And all of the powers share this, but if I was to go on a spectrum, I would say that as far as recognizing that they are a thing, the two interpretive powers, Nai and Ni, are the most difficult because they are literally patterns of things. So it's not the things themselves, it's the patterns of them. So that can be very difficult to see unless you use that kind of vision, which everyone has, but it's in a higher, lower hierarchy for some people, and within that there are great ranges of development. Next, going down, just I say real quick, spend much time here, but would probably be the values-based powers, then the logic-based powers, and finally the literal-based powers. As far as a scale of, if you don't speak that language, there's a good chance you might think it doesn't exist. Everyone admits that history happened and like right now the five senses are happening, so no one really debates the literal one. Then you get into how much of that is affected by like principles and logics and other dynamics on it. Well, that's kind of, that's sort of conceptual. It's a logical conceptual, but that's the easy one people have. When you start getting in the realm of like emotions and values and things like that, that's getting quite intangible for a lot of people to recognize that something's going on, and then actually beyond even emotional values is actually pure patterning, pure spirit forming, pure conceptual forming. That it's the most difficult to register that it is happening unless you have that kind of vision and you are activating it. Okay, so back to what I was saying. The frustration is you have to take a time out and you have to just keep filling the cup, right? Developing the photograph until it gets done. So when people come up, normally Nai takes the tactic of, or the position or perspective of, fuck off. You're of no help. In fact, all you're going to do is mess up my satellite array. I've got tuned trying to find out the depth of the solar system or something like that, or the depth of the entire cosmos, and you're coming around and you're just going to mess it up because I need spirit forms. But there is one of the power that, again, deals in it, and that is the abstractions of Ni. Ni pulls out from the environment pure abstractions. So Nai needs the environment but doesn't like it a lot because it is not helpful in most ways. So normally it tends to take the approach of doing it all by itself, but that is very laborious, so it's slow, not as efficient, and it'll never be as great as it could be because it's completely self-propelled. Ni actually can find Nai where it is currently positioned in the environment, whatever that means, and that can be a conceptual environment, an ideological environment, or a physical environment, and then give it pure spirit forms, actually augment it. So when it comes to pure spirit forms, it is conceptualizing and envisioning on the left side of the brain. It is the abstractions on the right side of the brain. We're talking pure spirit forms. So that's cool because this actually is going to up the power of the Nai, make its job much easier, make the cup fill quicker. Because until the cup fills, until the canvas sketch takes some shape, until the photograph develops enough, there's nothing to go on. And Nai is very much kind of all or nothing that way, in that, well, you can guess, of course, there's that gray area, which you have to be a master of the gray area. But you don't know, and then you know. And so until you know or guess, you can't move. You're waiting. That is part of the frustration, is waiting for that freaking photograph to develop. So Ni actually can come from the outside. It's the only power that can really do this without a lot of static being added. Other powers can contribute to this process that Nai is doing, but they have varying degrees of static or will be interpreted as toxic to the process Nai is trying to accomplish. Ni is a pure upgrade. It's just upgrade, 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 upgrade. They're meant to actually work as like an equal inverse process there. One part of it's the unconscious, one part's conscious. So anyway, the envisioning conceptualizing is often one of the most just agonizingly long processes that Nai and Nai users must endure, and the abstracting and gist getting basically cuts it in half. In fact, I would go much more than that. I would say it's like a chemical reaction that operates in an exponential capacity. And this is why I mentioned many times when it comes to like peak pathways and things like that. When you're talking about development level, as you go up the development levels, they are exponentially greater than the ones below it. So that one person who had that development level would be the equal in sort of abilities, life abilities, of many, 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 many of those level below it. So it's an exponential leveling system like that. And that is because there are certain feats you can't pull off. So let's say there's a cup and I need to fill it, or there's a canvas, I need to fill it, what do you want to call it? There's sort of like an amount of material to do that canvas. First of all, let's say it's one I can self-do. That is self-propelled, which takes a lot of time, and that makes it rather laborious all the way towards the end, and you don't do your best work in that state. The next part is there are larger canvases, greater things, just greater. Just that word, greater, that's all I need to know. That you have to be able to fill them up with the spirit forms, with the conceptual forms, or you can't do it. It's a sort of interpretive math. And without the abstractions of Ni in a person, for example, unconscious, or whatever way it would be for them, they're not going to be able to do that kind of natural law calculations. I don't use that because it sounds very logic-based, but theorizing. You are theorizing, and you need, on certain theories, to understand them. It's a concept we bring a lot here as far as the mandala pod layer, is the size. Is trying to make things manageable, but certain concepts are just extremely large. So when Nai is trying to develop that concept, it's like a size of photograph you're trying to develop. Imagine I make a screen, like just the perimeter of it, and then I gradually make forms in it, and then it has meaning. Does that make sense? The speed of that is very much related to how much abstractions I can get from the other side of the brain. That'll be much faster, the quality much better. But more than that, there are larger frames and lenses that I like concentrate and just let the conceptualizing and the envisioning happen, but it won't hold. It's hard to explain the webbing of it. It won't reach and hold. It's not powerful enough. It needs to reach more. Ni makes lifting and reaching easier. It makes things lighter. It makes you able to stretch much farther. So when envisioning and conceptualizing, there's an attempt, like I said before, like Frank Frazetta, to figure out what size canvas it is. Sometimes, to give a sort of metaphor, Nai works like this. It'll look at a problem, it'll take a canvas and go over it. And the canvas sort of vibrate and start to take shape of what it needs to be. Often that vibration goes outside the borders of it. So, Frank Frazetta style, you don't even start there. You put the canvas down. You haven't even started yet. And you pick up another canvas. You know this whole thing? That. And you just keep doing that, and you figure out what would it take to get it, to get that shot, to do whatever you're trying to do. And you're like, wait a minute. Maybe. And you keep going bigger and bigger. That's cool, and eventually you'll get it. But the problem is sometimes, and for the most epic of maneuvers, there comes a point where that's just too big. You shut down. Nai is the absolute maximum capacity of how much size, weight, density, and mass you can handle. But that's aided by buoyancy, how how expansive you can make something. So the two together, you get how the exponential factor comes in. Nai can lift very, very large stuff depending the more developed it is, and Ni, it can make things lighter and lighter. So you basically have a spell of lightness with a spell of like superhuman lifting strength. So those two together are going to be able to capture the largest patterns. In order to pull off the greatest breakthroughs as far as intuitive understandings, the two interpretive powers must be working together. And I went on there a little bit because that's a main concept that we're gonna just keep going on here, and it really is highlighted right there. I mentioned before, the brute energy part for Ni and for Nai, where they do something special. Nai detaches, you vibe the environment. Those are very kind of magical sounding processes. That's what's happening, kind of like there's a vibe here. And Nai's like, I'm gonna check out for a while, I'll be back. And in doing so, pure spirit forms can be gotten. When done together, it is faster on the basics, but it's like an entire new chemical set. This relates actually to all the workings of the psyche. This is just the first film we were doing as far as inspirational powers, is the fact that it's like a full chemistry set in your mind. And Nai has certain properties as an element. But those powers can be aided at their initial functions, their initial abilities, like the initial power flow, by Ni. All these can be done, what they're already doing, by Ni, better, with more mastery. But more importantly is, just like Nai already takes the tact of it needs to increase its scope as large as possible where you can't see the problem, you cannot go as far as possible with Nai alone. Nai alone will reach out its maximum, but then it is in the calculations of the mind of how the psyche works, it is the lightness of Ni. It is the expansiveness of Ni in combination of that which will actually stretch the total understanding. So that total understanding is like a metaphor of like algebra, advanced algebra, geometry, all this, trigonometry and the crazy stuff, all the way to like, super astrophysics, cosmology. But a mathematical analogy there, it's a size of a problem, and if you can't get your brain around that size, you can't work on it. Like the RAM can't do it. So a lot of issues have to do with patterns, particularly big issues, because the bigger they are, the more you can't go into the details, the more you have to actually just take the pattern points. So the two that are good at doing that are Ni and Nai, and they have to work in conjunction. And spirit forms are basically extremely dense, universal, extremely dense, extremely sophisticated, universal concepts, forms, things that can be used for anything. So they're kind of like wild cards in the psyche. So if you want big mojo, you must get both. Okay, next. It's not obvious, I'll say it there. Why does Nai need Ni? Because Nai has an obsession with being great. And to be great, you have to do unprecedented things. In order to do that, you have to keep going beyond what you currently were able to do in some way, what you are currently able to understand some way. And Ni is going to super bonus charge that. It's like nitro for Nai. It's going to allow it to beat all its Nai buddies, all of the Nai users and all of the psyches. Their ability to get their Ni in touch with them has the majority to do with how well they're going to do, because that's like Scrabble. The individual power flows, as you go through each one, they kind of like increase exponentially in value as you're able to go further in the power flow. But when you add in the inspirational power, that like magnifies it by like some sort of crazy thing that we don't have math for. It's that awesome. So Nai, it's really grateful because it wants to win the greatness game, and it can't do it without Ni. In fact, Ni is like its personal genie for greatness. Without that genie, it can't get there. With genie, it gets greatness. So it's that simple. So those who have Nai but aren't cool with their Ni, this happens. People have inspirational powers and they're not cool with their actual own inspirational power in their own psyche and in other people. That's going to limit their powers a lot because you actually learn about the upper limits, the upper maneuvers of one power by its inspiration and its modulation. Those two playing off actually teach the whatever power you're talking about how it can do its stuff. Does that make sense? because the inspiration power will keep making it create more and do more than it knew it could do, give it more energy, and the modulation will actually teach it ways to restrain itself and to discipline itself that didn't know it could do. Next, synergy synthesis. Okay, so continuing the frustration theme is, remember we had to crush it down. It's already really huge, and I was like, oh, crush it down. And then by the time we get there, we usually come away with the feeling, as mentioned in the frustration filming, of how did I not already know this? And how didn't people already know this? And that's because Nye takes the approach of going out as far as it can, reaching, then creating a frame, and then beginning to develop what it looks like coming inward to a point in the middle. Only when it starts getting closer towards the middle does the picture have a lot of shape, does it have a lot of meaning to it. So with Knee works the opposite way, as mentioned in the Knee filming. It kind of comes from an individual point, and then it spreads out like lightning in all directions until it reaches the limits, thus expanding them. So brainstorming / idea generation is what happens when abstractions are set loose from the ground zero. So at ground zero, the abstractions are taken out, and then boom, they are released, and they go out in all directions and do what they do. That is going to make it to where the synergy and synthesis again happens much faster, because it's coming from the outside scope coming in, and someone actually came up to meet it. The other powers don't do this. Only Knee actually does something, brainstorming, that actually comes out to meet the effort of the Nye's effort coming inward. So again, it's like, oh, cool, thank you. I'm not as frustrated as before. Next is inclusiveness perspective shifting. So we now have a model here in our mind. We haven't yet set it to a real form yet, but it has universal sort of application, as we've mentioned, and therefore we can jump around and see different people and different systems' point of view. This, as mentioned, the frustration filming isn't always received well by people, and they often can't even see it. So they can't see it, and if they can see it, they don't tend to receive it too well. Not so with Knee. Knee does cross-contextualizing and idea juggling. One of the reasons why the inclusiveness perspective shifting throws people off is because when you try to explain it to them, you say, you see, you're here, right? But if you do this, then this will happen, and then over here there's this, and then there's this, and this, and this. And about what seems to Nye a very short way into that process, people's eyes start flipping over and they start dropping things. They can't hold on to that. And that's because you can't really hold what Nye throws at you. It's too big. It's too vast. It has to be juggled. It has to be cross-contextualized. It has to be lightly touched on by a million, nearly infinite different fingers, while not actually held, because Nye is too big and too heavy to hold. But it can be juggled and it can be cross-contextualized. And so therefore, when Nye attempts to explain itself, to figure out what it's seeing, the cross-contextualizing idea juggling makes for a kind of metaphysical scout in the psyche. We often equate Knee with scouting, and it very much does this with Nye. As Nye is going around the model and trying to shift perspectives, it can get lost in there. And if itself does not get lost, it almost always loses any other power that is attempting to follow that process. But the cross-contextualizing and idea juggling of Knee means that it does not get lost when it's following that, and while the following is happening, there's a lot of nuggets, which are very large, that keep getting picked off and added to it. Knee has, like Nye, an ability to handle really, really large things, pattern-based things. So juggling these vast conceptual weights is easy for Knee. It's kind of like physical weights. There's physical weights, there's emotional weights, there are logical weights, and there are actually like pattern-based weights, conceptual weights. So different powers consider different things heavy. All of the powers consider the conceptual forms of Nye to be very heavy when it gives it to them, and to be coming too fast. Knee considers it not to be very heavy and not to be coming too fast. It wants it to come faster and to be heavier and cooler. It's like bring on greatness. Next, meaningful insight, seeing the angles. Just seeing the different perspective and shifting around is one thing, but now you're actually going to start figuring out how you're going to play personally. And this is something that frustrates Nye to no end. You've probably seen this in countless like spy movies and things like that, and other cop movies, whatever. It's a little cliche. A lot of it's Nye. Nye has a way of doing things that comes from the previous processes, and now it's going to start trying to figure out its trail and explain that to people who haven't done the other stuff or wouldn't know how to do that, which Nye can do that. It's just a waste of time. You say, I'm not going to bother, I can't take a new partner, I can't do this, because to try to explain that, no, I'm not going to bother with that. But see, Nye has something, trend tracking and track jumping. It's a unique ability for it to come into the biggest of arenas, the highest stakes, the most intense peak moments and the venues that hold them, and jump right in. Nye usually has to deal with, as it gets further along its process, the freak out factor. And that again aids the frustration. But all of Nye's powers in its power flow actually, there's no freak out, or if it is, it's a positive, happy freak out. Let's see. So again, trend tracking and track jumping is Nye needs to jump between different trails that are trending. So it's wired to actually see that happening. Like mentioned in conversation, two people are talking and they are trending a conversation. They may not even know they're doing that. For example, Nye may be trending a certain way when it is on a trail. It doesn't know it's trending. It's tracking. Does that make sense? To the Nye user, it's tracking something, but by doing so, it's trending a certain way. And again, explain that to someone else is very frustrating, so usually Nye's like, I'm the lead detective, I'm not gonna bother with it. But Nye can just jump right in as if it's been on the case the whole time, because it reads a pattern that are abstractions on down, and it has a universal interface. It can figure out the conceptual case, because if you try to understand the case in anything but a conceptual or abstract sense, it's way too slow. Does that make sense? Like, if you try to understand it in that sense, you could learn it in maybe a few minutes. If you try it another way, it might take like forever or never. You simply couldn't do it. It's a way of speaking. So that's really cool. So you see that when it starts coming to taking action, what Nye will intend to do. It wants to navigate a course. As mentioned later on, independence of mind, things like that, part of that is a necessity, because when you start doing this, those meaningful insights and angles that you can see and others can't, it kind of means you're going to go it alone. That is usually the assumption. Even Nye of another person doesn't necessarily see another person's Nye. That's not Nye's intent. Nye's intent is to find, it's kind of like two hunting animals. I guess they will notice each other, they do have that kind of perception, but they're actually tracking their prey. Now sometimes while doing that, they cross paths, but they are not actually designed to know each other around overly, other than the marking of the trees and so forth. But it's not part of their normal process. They can't function around each other. There is a point at which Nye has done as much as it can. It is canvassed the area. But Nye canvasses patterns in a different way. It relates more to the objective environment, and thus has a lot to do with the application end, which Nye is trying to work towards. Nye is the first thing that's going to help Nye in its long journey to V, to explain what it can do. When Nye does trend tracking and track jumping, it's scouting a trail, and in doing so, it finds the trail for anyone who would come after. This is something that the first wave mojos have a lot, and that's because their first power, the source power, is either Nye or Nye. It is that ability to find out the answer for everyone or every system through the course of discovering it yourself. So Nye is on a trail, and when it's doing so, Nye actually tracks what it's doing and goes all around it and finds all the side trails that Nye is unaware it's making available. It's on its main primary pathway and just keeps making one large body of water cutting a ravine. That's the power of Nai, but Nai doesn't really spread out. It tends to actually go till it solves its one case. There are lots of things that happen along the way because of its movement that it's unaware of, but Ni can point out and add to it. Because Nai has a problem, like it's kind of like a shark this way. Similar to Ni, but totally different. Ni in a more outward way. Nai can't stay still. Both those powers cannot stay still, they have to keep going. But Nai, it's in a more single-minded, focused in one direction kind of way. A lot of times in doing so, there can be things outside the periphery of the way Nai's interpretive pattern recognition works that would make the process much easier, much faster. And Ni illuminates it. Ni adds illumination to whatever Nai is doing. Nai actually does it for Ni in another way, but we'll get that to the filming. But that's one of the fundamental things is weight, but also lightness. Lightness, like of weight, but also of brightness. It makes things light when they were dark. You can literally see something that was there, and that wasn't apparently there before, and that's because it's sort of, for lack of a better term, abstraction vision. When Nai is cutting a swath through the psychic terrain, or it's seeing things out here, it agitates things. Just like different animals in the in the ocean, their lives are affected by the other one. The thing that Nai does, it agitates the environment in a way that it releases a lot of abstractions. When Ni uses abstractions, it illuminates the environment in a way that tells Nai's spirit forms where to go to keep getting the rituals they need to keep channeling. So it's like in those nature specials, it's a symbiotic relationship. So there's a symbiotic relationship with the entire psyche, but it's really highlighted with the inspiration pairings. Speculation prediction. As mentioned, Nai is going to experience trepidation because even though they have it well thought out, it is just all theory and it could fail. So there's the chance of looking foolish and so forth. And there's also the problem with getting anyone to go along with this based on speculation and prediction. But Ni has an answer for this. It is optimism and risk-taking. So when you go, well, you see, I'm going to try this, but I've never done it before, so it may not work. They're like, can I press the button? Can I press the button? You're like, oh, sure. You're like, wow, this is like the coolest partner ever. So they're like, that's how it is for Nai. For Nai, Ni is like the coolest partner ever. Well, it's why they did that is with their optimism and risk-taking, that comes from their ability to see these things. And so they also have innately that hit or miss quality. So as long as you have, by their standards, a good track record or something they can go on, then that's enough. Now, what is that track record according to them or something they could go on? Well, two different ways of looking at it is the way Nai jumps at things. It may come up with a concept from area A, and then take that and now apply it to area B and area C, all theoretically. But they go from here to here to here. That's difficult for a lot of people to follow. So trying to explain to them how this concept, which looks 3 collegiate disciplines apart from one another, like 11 degrees of separation, 7 degrees of separation, there's like, that's a lot of degrees of separation. You jump from like astrophysics to over here to over here. Most people don't like that as a track record. Often it's preferred, for example, I did it once in January, I did it again in February, I did it again in March, and that's, I got that, that's like a by track record. But Nai, it's a different one. It explains things like, you see, in 1864, they did this thing, right? I think it was because of this concept. Now over here in Munich, blah, blah, and then down here in a laboratory here, and then squid off the coast of Africa, and people are like, that's not track record, that's just some shit you saw on cable. But if it's real, and it can be real, me can actually follow that. And it's like, yes! How doesn't everyone not see this? And I'm like, right, that's what I'm saying. So they have a little happy union there. Giggly when I do Nai. See, the different powers, they affect you when you do them, so Nai with me gets me all giggly. Let's see. Long-range planning, global modeling. I'm going to do these 3 together and then compare 3 together because you start seeing the complexity and they all kind of relate. You got long-range planning, global modeling, visionary drive / sense of destiny, independence of mind, secretive. Well, there's several things going on there. It's so long, it's so big. You're obsessive, you won't stop. It's relentless with visionary drive. Independence of mind, it's got to be that way. You're difficult to deal with, yada yada. So there's frustration for everyone. The Nye user's frustrated, and so is everyone else who's experiencing this. But that's how it works. That's how Nye works. So Nye has improvisation, riffing, pattern surfing, and creative energy / contagious enthusiasm. So how do these work? So there's a lot of things going on here. Well, first of all, with visionary drive and sense of destiny, there's often the problem of it's so implacable, it's so uncompromising. Based on a concept, a lot of the other powers don't like that. As mentioned before, it comes off as audacious and, again, implacable just because you've decided or you think it is a certain way. Because you believe you've seen truth, you're being implacable. So you've introduced this incredible force into the environment just because you believe you've seen a thing. That worries a lot of other powers, and different mojos can be concerned by that. But Ni, with the, for example, pattern surfing, it needs that. It needs surges of patterns moving, waves of pattern moving, large models of pattern moving, long-range planning that's going to create waves of patterns to surf. So if there's no patterns to surf, again, it's bored, it's starving, it doesn't have what it needs to do what it does. Because Ni is like a great traveler, a great, rover of the metaphysical and mental highways. It wants those kind of large model waves so it can jump from one to the other, so it can carry across vast distances, so it can cross-contextualize vast distances. It can cross-contextualize kind of like a little village, but it wants to just not cross-contextualize what's in the village. It wants to cross-contextualize what's in that village to everything else. So it will instigate Nye to do it. And as mentioned, the long-range planning, the global modeling, it's like, oh, it's so big, it's daunting, you don't even want to bother doing it. Ni will instigate Nye to do it because it wants waves to ride. So it'll like, do it. And that rarely happens in any other kind of powers or any other situation other than Ni, at the core of it, requires it to ride. So it wants you to do that. So it has the ability, it's built this way, it's evolved this way, to instigate in Nye a lightness of being, to make long-range planning and global modeling seem small. Because the pattern surfing of Ni, again, illuminates. And that illuminating quality makes just for a lightness of visuals, a lightness of weight, and a lightness of spirit, of being. Because Nye can be very daunting sometimes, it's a very natural law. So that makes it promising. That desire to surf the waves comes from the fact that Ni can get good things out of it. That's the first taste that Nye's getting here, that like, there will be good from this. Because up to this point, it's mainly like, it's truth. But I don't know if it's really very fun. Who cares? It's truth. I don't know if it's even benefit me. Who cares? It's truth. So all you really get being Nye is, who fucking cares? It's truth. Do it. That truth is what truth is. So this is the first time that something is saying to Nye that this is awesome what you've done. This is really bringing in the heroic nature. So beginning, it just simply makes it easier to be heroic. But now it's making Nye feel heroic. Because Nye's worked all this way back, and it still seems like quite a long way until systems or the people recognize what it's doing. But the need to surf form or pattern-based waves gives Ni an eye, a palette, and a surfboard, an apparatus, a vehicle for riding what Nye creates, and therefore it has evolved to feed it, to instigate it, to provoke it in a very pleasing way. Inspiration powers, they provoke their inspirational partner in a way that is pleasing, that actually makes the power want to do more of what it was doing. Creative energy, contagious enthusiasm is yourself, the Nai user, often, as mentioned in the filming, has to stop kind of each power flow. I don't know if I mentioned that, but you do, and kind of like get your strength back because it's so heavy. It's kind of like doing massive, like high weight lifting where you do like a single rep, put it down, wait like 10 hours, do another rep, put it down, because it's so heavy. Or you walk at 10 feet, put it down. So that's how Nai kind of feels. So with contagious enthusiasm and creative energy, the creative energy kind of relates to the Nai user. It makes that task easier. They're like the ultimate inspirational coach where they can say, come on, you can do it. It'll be so cool when we go there. And you're like running over, the next thing you know, you did it and didn't even feel like it was a thing. It makes it weightless in the mind. Nai already has a great power of mind over matter because of the way it's built, but it is augmented, it is inspired, it is exploded in an exponential way by its inspirational power. What it can do is just, it's already amazing what it can do on its own, but with that, it amazes itself. So get that? That's like double amazement within me. Also contagious enthusiasm, because these powers, as mentioned before, they're so large, they're intrusive, they're audacious. People are like, who is this guy bringing this stuff in here? But the contagious enthusiasm can get other people or other systems to think, you know what? Maybe this isn't so crazy. Maybe this isn't such a wild, completely daydreamy, made up, not really real. And I use that word in particular, even though it's a very simple word, but it's amazing what is considered real based on being tangible. But there are a lot of things that are not tangible, but they do affect your behavior because you have a thought and you train yourself to think a certain way, like memes, like language. You really can't hold on to them except when you write a book down, but they have a powerful impact on things. So contagious enthusiasm causes people to become buoyant, to start looking for possibility. And that's needed to see Nai. If you're not trying to look for possibility, you won't see Nai. Nai could be right in front of you, and Nai saying, look, it's right here. And it will have to drag underwater with like hooks in it, tons of weight, until it can get to V and prove that it's true. That will work, but that is extremely difficult. It's a very long process, and without being fed along the trip, a lot of trips just won't get made. They're not possible. But Ni will make them impossible. It will make the impossible possible. Nai pulls the biggest weights. So when Nai says, that's it, that's as far as we can pull, that's as big as we can look, that's all we can do. That's the limit. That's all that's possible, unless you bring Ni in, because Ni can just make up more. It can add to Nai. Nai will expand the scope as far as it can be expanded just based on the power to detach. But the power to detach is only half of spirit forming because the world has spirit forms. But Nai doesn't like them a lot of times. It's just because they're embedded. They're embedded in the V. The V has Ni embedded in it, the spirit forms embedded. There are spirit forms embedded in the G and Z dynamics. And so mainly the world seems like it has a lot of locked up spirit forms that are being used for adverse purposes or distracting purposes to what Nai's spirit forms are doing, chasing, building. So Ni actually can pull these out through abstraction and connect them like a union of opposites to the Nai spirit forms, the Nai's concepts. And then it can do, when it comes to interpretive, intuitive, pattern-based understanding and perceptions, that is the most humans can do. If you want to do the most humans can do at that, you've got to get Ni to help out Nai. You need all the Ni power flows to help out correspondingly to the Nai. And then you can do what humans can do. And then keep learning the new frontiers, which again will come from, in that case, as far as understanding of patterns, Ni and Nai. Ni and Nai will have to keep being the ones that do that. So whatever humanity's greatest use of Nai and Ni together, that is humanity's, the collective, the system, the people's greatest understanding of patterns. Because whenever you're trying to get a greater knowing, you always start by constellating. You constellate, you guess, you feel out vague forms, and then you go from there. That's what Nai and Ni do, and together they can do it better, and they can do unique and higher level things that are only done when that union of opposite happens. That union, in this case, of wonderful opposites, of mated opposites. So this all goes under the theme, remember, of proactive theorizing, abductive reasoning, which is proactive theorizing is the desire to theorize on something that doesn't necessarily need to be theorized about. People wondering why you're theorizing about that. That doesn't seem important, or perhaps it's a case that's already closed. People are saying, why are you opening that case? Or why are you making a case? Why are you making a case of it? That's what proactive theorizing does. It makes a case. People are like, dude, why are you making a case of it? And abductive reasoning. You're talking about something, and you go, you know what? What if you took, I know we're talking about, like a criminal case here, but what if you took in the concept of making curry? And you're like, what the, dude, again, what is with you? What's your problem? See, this is because most people, when they're doing something, whether they know it or not, they have chosen an approach, what we often call a mandala, a way. And the way, which everyone uses, is so vast that they don't really know they're doing it, but they do know when you attempt to get them to change it, they get agitated, they don't like changing. Nai is a game changer, it's what it does. But Ni, change initiation. That's the only party it likes. It likes new, it likes undiscovered, it likes unprecedented. So again, if the way has been doing what it's always been doing, then shouldn't we be doing the way a bit differently? Should we change the way? Maybe we should initiate some change in the way, and then we get different cool, new spiffy stuff. So when the proactive theorizing of all these powers happens, Ni is like, I like it. I like where this power's going. I like that pod power. That pod power, yeah, they know how to party. Yeah, that's what it thinks. Because Ni is into change the initiation. It tells, again, the heroic thing that the proactive theorizing is basically creating a peak ritual. Ni takes the power flows of Nai and considers them to be peak rituals. This allows Nai to understand itself, because when a power tries to do something and it gets a negative response, it thinks that it's doing it wrong, and then it shrinks. So when proactive theorizing happens, the other pod powers and Mojo's environment will start to go, what are you doing? Don't do that. And it's a form of flinching. Flinching shuts down Nai. And all of the powers tend to flinch except for Ni. Ni is a non-flincher. It's the least flinchy of all the powers. Because it wants the game to change. When the game changes, it means the dams get burst. It means waves happen. It means volcanoes happen. It means new land, new vistas, unprecedented. That's cool. That's opportunity for what it does. So again, it'll instigate. Maybe we need to be proactive theorizing, and Nai has run a cycle, so it is sort of tired. So it'll start proactive theorizing again when it regains enough energy, so it gets that itch. Ni again can provoke it in a pleasurable way, where it comes over and goes, don't you think we need to change around here? You're like, yeah, I think we do. And it'll say, what do you think that would be? And that'll get Nai going. Again, it's sort of like the ultimate quarterman or genie or partner. It's like buddy cops. It's the best thing ever, because its powers complement and need the Nai's powers in order to keep doing what it's doing. So it's also evolved to provoke in a pleasurable way Nai to keep doing things, which there's a lot to this and gets into peak pathways, but it speeds up the refractory period, because we're talking proactive theorizing and abductive reasoning. We're talking kind of like the whole cycle of the peak path, of the power flow. So after you kind of run through it, it's kind of like a muscle. You do a few reps of it, it kind of needs to rest. The chains initiation theme of Ni invigorates Nai. It picks it up. It makes it want to start doing cases again. Now, it makes that exciting. One thing that shuts Nai down is it often feels silly, or that there's no point. Even though it feels compelled to do it, it will shrug off its own instincts because of that. But the change initiation of Ni will accentuate those instincts to proactively theorize. Frustration and buoyancy. Long story short, frustration is not bad, but it is very heavy, it's very dense, and it is very focused. So those are pluses and those are minuses, all in the same thing. The weaknesses and the strength are just different sides of the same coin. So what it needs is the ability to move, to change, to become light as it is gaining size. And that's a problem. As Nai gains size, it also gains a sense of, this is why, though it's a perception power, it sometimes strikes people as very like uncompromising the way you might associate with discernment. But the reason is, it's not that it's discerning, it's simply that it is developing a truth picture. And as it gains size, it gains a sense of absoluteness. This again is a pro and a con. That absoluteness is good, but it needs the ability, as it picks up density and speed and momentum, to keep shifting, to not let its own weight become its own nemesis. The ability to do that can't be built into the frustration. Otherwise, the frustration couldn't do what it's meant to do. It needs to build density and momentum for a conceptual change. That's a single-minded focus. But it needs an awareness. So Ni, with its buoyancy, possesses an awareness and ability to create lightness in that tracking, and also ability to jump those tracks, not just for itself. It can jump tracks from one Nai user to the other, but this is where we're really talking the true power and the necessity of it. The overall buoyancy allows it to move the tracks in a good way. It can also be bad, which is why we're talking about inspirational couples now. They can be really great and really bad. But it possesses the ability to jump the Nai's tracks, which is necessary. Sometimes the Nai's picking up speed, it's like a bullet train. It needs the ability to jump tracks, and the only power that can let it do that is Ni. Ni can jump Nai from track to another track if it's an appropriate one that's been properly cross-contextualized, for example, with no loss of speed, no loss of power. The Nai train can keep going, and it was going to hit a wall. It gets bounced, it gets lifted up, a hole opens up, right? You can do that's possibilities. And the train can keep going, and it can keep building up speed, because otherwise it'll smash, or it'll have to come to a complete stop, turn like a sail ship, laboriously slow, and begin to slowly pick up that nearly inevitable energy and weight it does. But it's slow to do that. Nai is a very slow process. Not only does Ni have a lightness of weight, a lightness of spirit, and a lightness of visual, it's light fast. Its touch is light. So it gives a lightness of touch that Nai can lose. Nai is very interpretive, it's very intuitive, it's very open in a way, but it can be very heavy-handed and uncompromising in a way that can cause itself to break. Now when it breaks, it will reform stronger, but it could have avoided that break. It could have been stretched and moved around a thing that would have broken it, and that stretching is sort of like a mini ego death. It's like an ego massage, an ego workout, and it actually is it's just like magic how Ni can do that. It can allow the model to morph into something that Nai didn't know it could be. And that's important, because when Nai doesn't think it could be something, it's like, no, if it's not the truth, it's not the answer. But Ni works in pure spirit forms. It can morph the form of the Nai model, which may be coming near what would be imminent death. Theoretical death, application death, but by cross-contextualizing, by doing all these other things, it can actually make an out, it can make an exit, it can make an escape valve for where the Nai was going, and it can keep going. It can stay on the case. It can keep all the momentum it's built up. So, yay, we like Ni. So we'll go quickly over the counterbalances, which are Nai can be seen as self-possessed, driven, and original, but can be seen sometimes in a negative way as having egomania, being obsessive, being eccentric. Ni is going to help in two ways with that. The first is it helps cause Nai to have that sort of alchemic relationship with Ni that will make it be the better version of itself, the higher alchemic forms that we mentioned. Those higher alchemic forms will be interpreted by everyone more towards the positive side. So if Nai is getting a lot of alchemic interaction with Ni, then there's going to be much more chance that the social alchemy signals, or how they're interpreted by the social alchemies, will be on the more positive side. They'll be seen more as self-possessed, driven, and original. Without Ni, without the alchemic interplay that only Ni gives, it increases the chances very dramatically, almost ensures them, of being seen more as having egomania, of being obsessive, of being eccentric. So, because of the cross-contextualizing, the lightness, the scouting ability, the optimism, all those things, it stretches Ni. And that allows Ni to capture more than maybe than it intended. So it can seem obsessive if it can't come off a point. Even though Ni is forever going larger and larger, it sometimes takes a given middle point. Ni can shift the middle point. It can shift the middle point of the focus of a large Ni model, and it can bring into focus, bring into scope, bring into the frame things that are more important. They're more important particularly to the objective considerations, to G, to Z, to V, even to the other subjective powers. Because as mentioned, Ni has a unusual relationship like Ni in that it connects to all the powers. It's very connective. So when Ni has a good interplay with Ni, it shares and gets to take advantage of that connectivity, which gives it bonus powers, special lucky, unlocked mega powers that it only gets with Ni's connectivity being added to it. What else? Besides the fact that it will actually physically too, but it will literally make you a better person. So Ni that is interplayed with Ni is going to be interpreted by, at large, on the more positive side. Ni itself will then add a bonus to that by how it interprets it. So it will develop you to be interpreted by other people as more heroic, because you will be more heroic. Your Ni will be more heroic if it gets trained, it gets dancing lessons, it gets interplay, conversations, dialogue with the Ni. But then it's fun to do it those sessions because you feel really good, because as much as the environment sees you as having, with your Ni, egomania / self-possession, there's like a range on that. And then the Ni will train you to be more towards being seen as self-possessed. But whatever that is, the Ni will itself see you as self-possessed, because in that spectrum, it likes that spectrum. It wants Ni to be on the high end of the spectrum. It wants it to be elite. It wants it to be the best. It wants to be heroic. But it innately likes that spectrum. It doesn't find that spectrum, for example, innately problematic, like, for example, V would. V is going to take whatever would be the midline and go lower, substantially lower, and see more of the behavior or the development levels of Ni as having egomania. Does that make sense? So Ni is absolutely essential for how you're seen. You should have a lot of Ni around for your Ni, so that you can get seen in a heroic way and be trained in a heroic way. It's essential. It's essential. Finally, just touching on the fact that we may use sometimes the phrase deep anger. That's just sort of shade of the frustration. And 2 minutes is fine, I'll go quick here. Is that deep anger is often a kind of artistic anger, a visionary anger that begins artwork. And I've mentioned in the past year talking about how Ni works. Sometimes in the beginning it can be a bit ugly. It's just this raw desire that comes from a frustration that can build a deep anger to make something different, to go out further than has ever been reached before, to go in a direction you have never tried before, even though it may seem silly. So that's the positive side of it, but in the beginning it's very raw, and that can be very ugly. And so Ni, with its bouncy, waltzing ability, it has two powers. First of all, the rawness, the raw state of Ni when it's coming out, the deep anger tone it has, needs help coming out. It's shy. So the ability of Ni to walk in and speak Ni's language, to talk to it in a friendly way, through just pure energy, the way it understands is very friendly to Ni, that makes Ni's shy nature lessen. And then also the heaviness of the weight, sometimes it comes out ugly, and the Ni can just want to leave it in that state, in that raw, lumpy state of the material. But Ni, with its bouncy nature, will actually keep wanting to play on it. It will ask questions to the Nai, and in doing so, Nai will feel compelled in a enjoyably provocative way to answer. And when it does so, it will turn that raw art into fine art. So that's really cool. And so Nai just loves Ni. It's the bee's knees.